Okay, class. This video is going to be on estimating sums and differences of fractions using benchmarks. Benchmark fractions are really important because they help you easily figure out which fraction is bigger and what it's closest to. So benchmark fractions are the most common ones that help you compare. 1/4, 1/2, and 3/4 are benchmark fractions because they're easy to compute with mentally and are often used for estimation. And that's what we have to do today. We have to estimate sums, which are answers to addition, and differences, which are the answers to subtraction problems. So now I'm going to teach you how benchmark fractions work. Okay, so to start, I have to teach you what a benchmark fraction is. So think about between every whole number. Let's say I'm going to start here. I'm going to have my 0 and I'm going to have my 1. Between 0 and 1, between any whole number, you'll always have a half. Now between the 0 and the half, you'll always have 1/4. And between the half and the 1, you'll always have 3/4. Now, what I want us to think about is I want us to think that between the 0 and the 1, I want to break this up into tens. So I'm going to cut this line into 10 areas. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then that would be my 10. Now, of course, they're supposed to be equal, but for these purposes, you'll be able to see it. I have 0. This would be my 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, and so on. Okay, so looking at my benchmark fractions, I see I have 1/4, 1/2, 3/4. Looking at my number line that I have up on the top that's broken up into tens, I can see that, let's see, my half would be 5/10. And I know that because what is half of 10? 5. Excellent. Now I can see that 1/10, 2/10 are closer to 0. My 3/10 and 4/10 are closer to my half. 6/10, 7/10 would be closer to 3/4, and 8 and 9/10 are definitely closer to a whole. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is because I want you to think about fractions, and the first thing you have to do is you'll have to look at, well, what's my half? And how close is it to the half? If it's bigger than the half, then I'm going to use 3/4 as my benchmark fraction. If it's less than the half, but not so close to the 0, I'm going to use my 1/4. If it's really small and it's close to 0, like 1/10 or 2/10, then I would use 0. And if it was 9/10 or 10/10, which of course is my whole, I would use 1. So let's practice some of those. Let's see, if I gave you 1/9. Well, first thing I want you to think of is what's the whole? The whole would be 9/9. So is that anywhere close to the whole? No. What would half of 9 be? And I know it's weird because it's an odd number, but what would half of 9 be? Okay. 4, 4.5, 4.5. Okay, is this anywhere close to the half? No. So 1/9 would be close to the 0. And you'll come to discover that all of the unit fractions are going to be close to 0 because they all have a 1 as the numerator. So 1/5, well, of course, it'll be closer to 0 because it's only one of the 5 pieces. Okay, well, let's try another. Let's see. What if we have, let's see, what if we have 15/16? Well, what's my whole? You always want to think of your half and your whole. So let's do whole first. The whole would be 16/16. And what would be the half? Well, what's half of 16? Good, 8. So 8/16 would be the half. So what would 15/16 be closest to? Definitely, it would be closer to the whole. Okay, let's write down a couple of examples that would be close to 0, close to a fourth, close to half, and then we'll do ones that are close to a whole. Okay, close to 0. Remember I told you they'll be the unit fractions or close to the unit fractions as you can get. So examples would be, let's see, 1/9. Let's see, 2/20. That's really close because it's only 1 away from the unit fraction. So that would be close to 0. So would 1/15 or 3/100. All of those would be close to 0. If you drew them on a number line, well, you would think to yourself, well, what's half of 100? 50? Yeah, 3 is way, way down there, so it would be close to a 0. And half of 15? Well, we'd say 7.5, and 1 is definitely smaller than 7. And 20, half of 20 is 10, 2, much, much smaller. So close to 0. Again, you're going to think of unit fractions or fractions that are close to being a unit fraction. Now let's go straight to the half. Let me explain the half to you. The half, let's say close to a half or really equal to half, because that's what we're looking for. Well, we know 2/4 because half of 4 is 2. Okay, what if it's 8 as your denominator? What's half of 8? 4. So 4/8 is a half. What about 10? What's half of 10? Good, 5. So 5/10 is a half. What about 20? Good, 10. 10 over 20, that's a half. Let's do one more. What if it is 30? What's half of 30? Good, 15. Okay, so now I've got close to 0, some examples close to 0, and close to half, equal to half, really. Those are easy for me to look at. But let's think to ourselves, what if I had this as a fraction? What if my fraction was 3/8? 3/8 would be close to a fourth because it's not a unit fraction. The unit fraction would be 1/8, and 3/8 is greater than 1/8, but it's not a half. So that would be close to a fourth. Another example of a fraction that would be close to a fourth, it has to be bigger than a unit fraction, but smaller than a half. So another example, let's look at the 5/10 that we used. Well, the close to 0 would be 1/10, 2/10. So close to a fourth would be 3/10. Another fraction that would be close to 1/4 would be, let's say we're going to use the 10 over 20 as our half. So one that would be close to 1/4, remember we don't want to use a unit fraction. It's between the unit fraction and the half. So let's say, we can say 5/20 would definitely be close to a fourth. And let's use the example 15 over 30. Well, half of 30 was 15, so that is my half. So I have to be smaller than 15, so I can say that 7/30 would be closer to 1/4. Okay, now close to a whole. These are super easy because close to a whole is almost a whole. So let's see, that would be 3/4 as an example, or 7/8. Oh, let's see, 9/10. Or let's see one more, close to a whole. If my denominator is 15, close to 15 would be 14. So 14/15, 9/10, 7/8, and 3/4 are close to one whole. Now remember, I write, you write, so all of this should be in your journals so you can go back and look at it during homework time or right before your test. This is a good review. You have to have it written down, so write it down. If you need to, pause the video and come back to me as soon as you've copied it. So finding our whole is really easy because a fraction with the same numerator and denominator, such as 2 over 2, 5 over 5, 12 over 12, they equal 1. So to find close to 1, you just look at the numerator should be 1 or 2 less than your denominator. Okay, so let's practice. Let's say that you have 9/10 minus 5/8. Okay, and I want to estimate. I just want to figure out, okay, what could it be? Looking at 9/10, would that be close to 0, a fourth, half, or whole? Now think. Let's find our half. Well, what is our half? Our half would be, well, what's half of 10? 5. Is this greater than the half? Yes, it is. It's definitely greater than the half. But how far away is it from the whole? So I know that it's not half. No, it's definitely not 0. Then I have 3/4 and I have close to 1. Now, what did Miss Ayala tell you about the ones that are close to 1? Well, it says it, doesn't it? It says it's close to 1, and this is only 1 away from being a whole because my whole is 10/10. So here, I wouldn't use the 3/4. I would use 1 for 9/10. Now let's go to the 5/8. Let's see. Again, let's find our half. What's half of 8? Good, it's 4. So this is greater than the half. So again, it's not 0. It's not the half because it's bigger. I have 3/4 and I have 1 whole that I can choose. Well, in order for it to be close to a whole, the numerator needs to be either 7 or 8, and this is 5. So it's not going to be the 1 because it's not that close to a whole. Here, I'm going to have it as 3/4. So my new problem would be 1 minus 3/4. And remember, what is 1 whole? What does that equal? If it's in fourths, it is, good, 4/4 minus 3/4 would give us 1/4. So 9/10 minus 5/8, estimating it, would be about 1/4. Okay, let's try this one. What if we have 1/6 plus 3/8? Now, remember, I'm always going to think benchmark fraction, so I'm going to think 0, is it close to 0, a fourth, a half, 3/4, or a whole? So, well, I'm going to always do half. So what's half of 6? It's 3. Good. Now, remember to check the numerator. If it's only 1, if it's a unit fraction, it's going to be close to what? What did Miss Ayala tell you? Good. 0. So it's going to be 0. All right, now let's go to our next fraction. Well, what's half of 8? Good, 4, so that's my half. Is this equal to half? No, it's not, because it's smaller. It's smaller than the half, but it's not 0. So here, what would my benchmark fraction be? Excellent, it would be 1/4. So 0 plus 1/4 equals 1/4. So if you added 1/6 and 3/8, it would be about 1/4. Let's try another one. Let's do 6/8 plus 9/18. Okay, so first thing, we got to look at it. Do we have unit fractions? No. Okay, so we're not going to have anything close to 0. Let's go straight to our half. What's half of 8? 4. Okay, so this is definitely greater than a half. Okay, so it's not my half. It's either going to be 3/4 or 1. Now, in order for it to be close to 1, it would have to be 7/8 or 8/8. So it's not that either. So I come up with 3/4 for 6/8. Now let's go to 9/18. Well, what's half of 18? Oop, 9. Perfect. So this one works out easily as my half. So now I have 3/4 plus 1/2. Now, in order for me to solve it, I'm going to take what I know. Let's see. So 3/4 is really 1/4 plus 1/4 plus 1/4. And if I put 2 of these together, that equals 2/4. And 2/4 is the same as a half. So that would show that I have, let me make some more room. So that would show that I have 1/2 plus 1/2 plus this 1/4 that was left over. So that would give me 1/2 and 1/2 equal 1 whole. So it would be 1 and 1/4. I want to go back for a second to this one. Remember when we made our own number line? Oh, Miss Ayala made a mistake. See, even teachers make mistakes. What I want you to look at is the 3/10 and the 4/10. Miss Ayala had the arrow drawn to the half, but those are not a half. They would be closer to 1/4. The 5/10 is the half. Half, 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 okay? And the 3/10 and 4/10 would be closer to 1/4 because it's smaller than 5/10. 4/10 is not 5/10, so it can't equal the half. It would be closer to the 1/4. Okay, here I'm going to end this video. This is going to be part 1. I'll make a second one with some more example problems. So be on the lookout for that one too.